All right, guys, it's the Jack Crypto Guy, and I'm back with another episode of what is going on in the market. Obviously, if you've been living under a rock, which you're probably not if you're in crypto, you're probably just staring at the 1 minute chart. Everything is kind of just really choppy. Nobody knows what kind of direction things are going. There's a lot of people that are speculating whether we're going to get interest rate cuts in about 10 days now. And there's just a lot of uncertainty when it comes to the markets. Now, obviously, Trump just announced that there's a potential housing crisis that they want to sort of put out in the mainstream probably in the fall. Now, this is going to be really good for boomers, in my opinion, the ones that have been sitting on their assets. They've been locked into their real estate and they can't get out because the rates are too high. And frankly, money is just too expensive to borrow. So we're kind of in limbo with, obviously we have the monetary supply going up. We have global liquidity going up. We have a lot of the countries essentially stimulating their economy, which basically means they're injecting and printing money and putting it into their economies. Now, we are doing that in a stealth way through the Fed. We're basically printing money to buy back our bonds because frankly, nobody's really buying our bonds right now. Now, obviously that relates to crypto because crypto is first off, it's a risk on asset. Two, it's the main driver of any sort of asset, especially crypto, is going to be liquidity. Now, obviously there's been an influx with the treasuries and the spot ETFs, but that's usually going to be with Bitcoin and Ethereum. So in my opinion, that's the only reason why we've seen specifically Bitcoin and Ethereum, I would say, they've massively outperformed the market. Maybe if you've been in things like Solana or Sui or things like that, Hyperliquid, you've gotten lucky and you've made a pretty sizable return, but we're going to see if that sticks around and we're going to see kind of how things play out in the future. Now, I don't have a crystal ball. This is not financial advice. And if you're in crypto, you're essentially just gambling. So there's no crying in the casino, so to speak. But if I had to put on my thinking hat, I think that it's a pretty sure shot that we're going to get a 25, maybe even a 50% basis cut, probably in September. But I think that more importantly, I think that we're looking at least 2 more rate cuts for the year. And short term, I do think that that could be a sell the news event where we'll probably see a little bit of downturn, a lot of chop in the market because investors need to understand how to digest this. Why do they do that? Well, whenever we start cutting interest rates, it's usually because there's something breaking in the system that maybe a lot of people don't really see. And in my opinion, I think that regardless, even though that's pretty much a bullish thing that you want to see in crypto, I think that short term, we're going to see a little bit of a pullback. Now, I do think that with all these interest rate cuts, and I think that we're going to pretty much have to stimulate ourselves out of this sort of situation that we're in as a country where we're just taking on so much debt, we're printing money, and we're effectively doing stealth quantitative easing. I think that what's going to happen is once this all kind of flattens out and it's all said and done, I do think that things, specifically something like Bitcoin, is going to be very bullish. In my opinion, it's no coincidence that the whole Trump administration, the Republicans, they're pushing all of this legislative bills for specifically stable coins and of course for Bitcoin, and they're just kind of taking the training wheels off when it comes to the regulations that we didn't see previously. Now, I think that they do see sort of a path where perhaps they can try to, pay down the debt or do something about that when it comes to stablecoin issuing and Bitcoin. That all remains to be seen. I just think that if you're an investor in the market and you don't really know how to allocate, I think that you should look into the blockchains that specifically are integrated with Circle, which is pretty much the stablecoin for the United States. Now, there's obviously other stablecoins that are going to be utilized, but I think that realistically speaking, when it comes to centralized exchanges and companies and governments, they need to have something to some extent that they can control. Now, obviously being in crypto, I know that that's counterintuitive, but we can't really do much with that because, the government is, in a way, it's good that they're really bullish on crypto and, they're all adopting this. We see Bitcoin treasuries popping up left and right. And I do think that that's going to be the downfall of this cycle. I don't think that this time is any different. I think that we're still going to see some kind of version of a 4-year cycle. Now, I think that obviously with the spot ETFs inflowing, I think that we'll see probably less of a downturn when it comes to specifically any kind of crypto that has a spot ETF or perhaps a successful treasury company. So that all remains to be seen. And I do think that with the downturn that comes with the failure of certain treasury companies, I do think the more successful ones and the ones that are kind of set up in a longer term way, I do think that they're going to be able to absorb most of what goes on. But like I said, we don't really know what's going to happen. So if you're new to the channel, if you're new to crypto, if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment, subscribe, smash the like button, and I'll see y'all soon.